Well, I recognize two faces in the room anyway, Kelly and Kim, and this is going to be maybe a little repetitious for them. We discussed this in a class that they take in their first semester on here. What I'll be talking about today is the ethics as they pertain to the advertising industry. The advertising industry, as you probably know, is a multi-billion-dollar industry. When a spokesperson like Michael Jackson or someone can get a multi-million-dollar contract for one product, you can see that this industry generates millions and millions of dollars for the manufacturers and services and that sort of thing. Because it is such an extremely rewarding field monetarily, there's an awful lot of money to be made by people, and so there's a lot of questionable ethics that goes on in this industry about what is about stealing artwork and other people's concepts and ideas and things like that. And I'm just going to discuss some of the specifics about what is copyrightable and what isn't, and that sort of thing. Both the ethics that govern the industry and the individuals in the industry, there's those two different categories you can break it into. There are specific laws that govern the industry as far as copyright laws and trademark infringement laws and things like that. And as far as the individuals, it's just their own personal morals that govern them. This industry is interesting in the sense that because of computer technology, it's incredibly easy to break the laws and to do unethical things. It's extremely easy to do that. You can steal from someone else without much investment in computer technology and just very simply. So that's why this industry has a real burden to the individuals in the industry are the ones who have to police each other and sort of keep it as pure as possible. For instance, how many of you are familiar, I know Kelly and Kim will be, but how many of you are familiar with scanning and that sort of computer technology, scanning images? You know, you could actually take a photograph or someone else's artwork and scan it into a computer and then manipulate it, change it, alter it slightly, alter it greatly, and then call it your own. Because the technology is capable to do that, doesn't necessarily mean it's right, of course. For instance, Kelly and Kim are both in photography, and photographers are victims of this, as well as graphic designers and other artists, but photographers especially. People today, and I think it's different now than it was just a few years ago, people today don't have the same respect for another person's creation like they once did. When a painting was done by, say, Michelangelo or someone like that, it wasn't easy to recreate that, and that artwork was held up in great respect and esteem. It wasn't easy for someone to duplicate that. Now you can take an image and steal that image, so someone who is not capable of creating it themselves can still claim ownership to images by simply scanning them and using them how they wish. So that, I think, has been what has really broken down a lot of respect for creativity, someone else's ideas and someone else's talents. Logos, drawings, photographs, composition of elements, all of those sort of things are copyrightable images. How many of you, for instance, have seen a product maybe, or a logo or something like that, that reminded you of something you've seen previously? It was real close, and you looked at it and you thought, that looks just like something else I've seen, a logo that you've seen. that happens a lot. A lot of times it can be done subconsciously. You know, there's only so many things you can do with a circle unique. You know, there's a lot of shapes that are used over and over and over again: circles, squares, triangles, diamonds, things like that. But the unique combination of the elements, the type with that logo, for instance, the colors used in that logo, the unique combination of those elements is copyrightable and protected by law. Same with a photograph. That photographer, the instant that they click the shutter of that camera, they have created something, and that creation, that photograph, is protected by law. You will see books, for instance, of photography. You can purchase the rights to use a photograph. You know, if it's from, for instance, a company that sells photography in that way, or purchase the rights to use a photograph from a photographer. But to actually take a photograph that was printed in a book, for instance, and scan it and all, you know, you don't have the authorization to do that yet. That's why if you go to, say, Kinko's or something like that, a lot of times they will not color copy something out of a book for you. Well, legally they're not supposed to at all, because all images in that book are protected by copyright laws, and it'll usually say so in the very front of the book. And you'll go into a Kinko's and try to get something color copied, and they may look in the front of the book and say, "I'm sorry, I can't copy this for you because it's copyrighted, it's protected by law." So it's sort of it's real difficult for the advertising industry to protect its own, in a sense, because you're kind of left to your own devices to protect your own creativity. Now, large ad agencies and corporations and things like that, they have a whole legal staff, and they have more resources to protect their identity, their logos, and all images produced by that company and all. Small design firms and freelance photographers and things like that, they don't have that real support system behind them to protect them, so they're sort of left to their own devices. There's a lot of cases where a real small, sort of a David and Goliath story, where a real small company has been infringed upon by some corporate giant or something, actually won their case, but it costs them a great deal legally, time, that sort of thing. A lot of times the amount of money they're awarded really only scratches the surface of the profits lost and that sort of thing. I'll give you an example. About 6 years ago, Hallmark Cards started marketing a line of greeting cards that used, for instance, it was a paper that had, you know, fiber texture and stuff in it. It used brown ink. It had a real sentimental message to it. It had landscape drawings and that sort of thing on the front of the cards. A very small company had already been marketing a line of cards like that, and Hallmark had started creating this line of cards imitating this small company's product. The small company took Hallmark to court and won on what is called trade dress infringement. Trade dress just refers to the overall look of a product. If the two products are sitting on a shelf side by side and the average consumer cannot tell the difference between the two, they think both products are made by the same company, you've got a good case for trade dress infringement. They won $4-point-something million on this lawsuit to cover legal costs and that sort of thing, and also profits lost. Hallmark successfully marketed these cards for X number of years until the case was settled, and so there was several years in there that small company lost profits because of Hallmark's infringement. So it still probably doesn't cover what the amount of money they normally would have made. So that's just one case where the small guy won, beating the big corporate giant. But there are several other real specific titles. For instance, trademark infringement, copyright infringement, several things like that that are actually on the books, laws to protect artwork and creations of that kind. It's still not, it's real up in the air about the electronic media now and how that's affecting the industry. The laws can't keep up with the technology. The technology is advancing so fast that for someone who doesn't know the ethical procedures for how to handle artwork and sell artwork and buy artwork, they are able to do things that the laws are not yet written for to protect the originator of that work. So right now the industry is in a big upheaval trying to find a way to protect themselves. For instance, sometimes you can, if you're going to deliver artwork, say a design that you created, a logo or something, and it is held on disk, it's an electronic file. There are some ways that you can sort of beat the system. You can give them a file that is saved in a particular format that they can't open the file up and change it in any way. Sometimes you can embed your company name or some sort of a tagline like that in the file to protect yourself. Just by putting a circle C with your artwork and all doesn't protect you. You have to register that artwork and have it protected that way. You have to legally go to the expense of registering a design or something with the powers that be, the legal offices of the government and all to get that artwork protected. So that's very expensive for small firms, and usually the only people that do that are going to be larger companies. Of course, Coca-Cola, Reebok, large companies like that, you'll notice with their logos and all, it'll have a little TM or Circle R, something like that, a registered mark. Well, they've gone to the expense of doing that. A lot of small companies can't. So they just sort of take their chances, and if they're infringed upon, then they have to go to legal expense to protect themselves. There was a Tulsa design firm, and this is sad that it came from our own community. There's a Tulsa design firm that created a logo for a dentist, and it was very similar to a logo for a large ad agency in Minneapolis, a very well-known ad agency. Someone from the ad agency got a tip that their logo had been copied, and they notified the dentist. They got a hold of the logo and saw the dentist's name, and they contacted the dentist and said, "Did you know that your logo is a copy?" And the dentist didn't know what to do because they'd invested a great deal of money in their stationery. They paid several $1,000s for all these business cards and billing forms, and so the ad agency tried to help them out. They sympathized with that investment that they had made, and they said, well, what you probably ought to do is simply demand your money back for the amount of money that you paid for that logo design. You should go to that design firm and demand your money back. Go ahead and use the stationery until you've run out, and then have a new logo designed and invest in that stationery then. That's exactly what happened, and the dentist sent a Xerox of the canceled check to the design firm in Minneapolis to let them know that that's exactly what had happened. They had been compensated for that. The design firm is still in business. It's still going great guns. The one that had done the copying, it didn't put them out of business, but it certainly earned them a reputation in the Tulsa area, and they sort of had to rebuild their reputation because that got around pretty fast. Obviously, that's not a very smart business practice, because if you're going to throw caution to the wind and do that sort of thing, you're risking your business. You're risking a lot of lawsuits, which of course could put you out of business. The other side of the coin is just your personal ethics when you're working for a company. agencies and design firms and photography and people who work in this industry, they're working for a client, and they may not necessarily agree with that client. Case in point, it could be that you work in an ad agency whose major client is the NRA, or your major client is a nonprofit organization like pro-choice. Real controversial issues. You, as a photographer who's trying to put food on your family's table, may have some real personal dilemmas facing you. You may not believe in what the NRA believes, and you may not personally believe in pro-choice. And you're faced with the problem, do I accept this work and earn $15,000 on this job and have things a little easier in the household, over and above what I think is right? Do I want to do work for a client like this? There's a lot of people who they can separate themselves, like a lawyer in a sense. They can separate themselves from that person who's accused of a crime, or that they actually think is guilty of the crime, and they still have to defend them to the best of their ability. It's a little similar in the ad industry. You sometimes have to set your personal, if you can, set your personal views aside in order to do that work. Some people can't, and they simply say, for instance, Ackerman and McQueen is the largest ad agency in Oklahoma, and they have billables of around $100 million a year. Very large ad agency. One of their biggest clients is the NRA, and they employ lots of designers who work on that account. If you are someone who you very strongly oppose, your views oppose those of the NRA's, you may have to go to your immediate supervisor and say, I just really don't want to work on that account. I don't believe in what they do, and I don't think I can treat that account fairly because my views are in opposition of theirs. You have to make those decisions and take that chance. If it's a small enough firm that they can't afford someone who is real specific, they need someone who's real flexible and can work on every account they have, you may lose your job over that decision. Or if you're in a very large firm, they may be able to afford to assign you to certain clients, and you may never have to do any work for the NRA, although the company that you work for, does. If you own your own firm, you may be making a decision that could put yourself out of business. You may reject work that will cause the company's income to drop to such a level that you have to start laying people off. So there's really some big issues. At this point in your lives and your careers, you may not have real strong views about some of that stuff. Let me just ask the question of you: how many of you wouldn't have any problem at all doing work for a pro-choice organization? You wouldn't have a problem. I mean, you could do that. You either believe in what they believe in and would do the work, or you could separate yourself from it. It wouldn't bother you to do that work. How many of you could absolutely not? You could not do work for a pro-choice organization because your views are such that you believe strongly the other direction or whatever, and you just don't want to put yourself in that. You just face that dilemma. That may affect you when you're job hunting or whatever, and that's all well and good that you have those strong opinions. You just have to bear that in mind whenever you go to work for some company. They may support an issue that you don't. Here, about 3 years ago, there was a book written, I believe it was called American Psycho. And the book was about, has anyone heard of it or read it or anything? Well, the book was about a man, this came out actually before Silence of the Lambs. But the book was about a man who abducted women and skinned them alive.
Oh, God.
The publishing company that published the book, Simon & Schuster, got a huge uproar from all the women that worked for them. The women of the company said, if you choose to publish this book, we'll all quit. We cannot stand by and have you support this sort of literature and publish this kind of book. Simon & Schuster backed down and they did not publish the book because it so upset the women that worked for them, because the entire book, I mean, I can't give you any more specifics, I haven't read the book, but it was just that the entire book was crimes against women, that sort of thing, and it was very graphic. And so the women band together and stood up and said, we can't support you publishing this sort of book, and they didn't publish it. The book did get published by another company, so it didn't stop the book from going to the public. But at least Simon & Schuster understood a little bit more about the people that worked for them and what they believed in, what offends them, that sort of thing. So there's, you know, you kind of have to respect people who can stand up and face getting fired, face losing a great deal of money or losing their company or going out of business, whatever. You have to sort of respect people who can stand up and do that, because it's not easy in this country to, right now anyway, to find another job. The job market is very tight, and it's not easy to stay in business. So that's admirable, I think. But let's see. Do you guys have any questions about anything that's just real specific?
Does advertising still use subliminal methods? Does advertising still use subliminal messages?
That's a good question. I just read an article yesterday that said that there is a rumor circulating in the country again that advertisers are using subliminal messages. It's not true. There was, about 20 years ago, I believe, there was sort of an experiment done where it was, I'm sure you've probably heard of it, where in the course of a movie, images of popcorn and pop were inserted, you know, just one frame, and as the frames go by, 30 frames a second or something like that, you know, you didn't see it, but that you should feel the need to go buy popcorn and pop. It was a failed experiment. It didn't work. It had no effect on the viewing audience, and it was abandoned. But the rumors have circulated time and again that that sort of thing is done with images and ice cubes and liquor ads. Have you heard that sort of thing? You know, that there's naked women or something in the ice cubes of liquor ads, you know, and things like that. And it's not true. They're not. They've not been found to be true, and it doesn't work. The experiment was proved a failure.
Wouldn't that be an unethical practice to do that?
That's sort of a personal opinion. I would think that it is, because you can advertise your product in normal ways, you know, and they already use scantily clad women to advertise alcohol and things like that anyway, so it doesn't seem to me like it would really be necessary anyway. And also with, for instance, with the movies, now it wouldn't make people necessarily go buy popcorn or pop, but you know, you'll notice that there's an awful lot of products that are hyped in a movie. E.T. ate Reese's Pieces, you know, and that, I mean, the sales of Reese's Pieces soared after that movie. For instance, in the movie The Firm, Tom Cruise drank Red Stripe beer or something, some Caribbean brand of beer, and sales skyrocketed after that movie. So just by having an actor use a particular product in a movie or something is advertising enough, and that is a growing business. There are people who go to Hollywood and they are lobbying these directors and all to use their products in the movies. So they're getting free advertising that way. That's a good question. I think it would be unethical. You know, sort of up to you what you would think. But I think there's so many other ways that you can advertise your product. You know, that's really kind of an unfair jab, you know, to do that sort of thing. But and it doesn't prove to be anything to do.
Let's say I viewed a video a while back that was suggesting that not necessarily just, well, it was advertising the packaging that products come in, that they have the shapes of them. The message is of a sexual nature, the shapes of the packages and that sort of thing, for colognes and lipsticks and makeups and men's toiletries as well. So.
Yeah, and unfortunately in this country, sex sells. And until you know, until that doesn't, it's constantly going to be used psychologically. You're right. The shapes of the packaging and subtle messages, you know, all that sort of thing is used to sell products, and unfortunately it really sells. Just like the jeans ads, you can see an ad for a pair of jeans, and the jeans are not shown at all because the two people in the ad are buck naked or something. You know, they're not even wearing the product, and yet it's selling this brand of jeans. So yeah, that's done all the time. I mean, in Europe it's not as subtle. You know, in Europe they do have a censorship board that views advertisements before they go on television, but they're not as strict about it as they are in this country. And it's sort of interesting because they can get away with a lot, you know, more nudity and sexual innuendo and things like that. One of my favorite quotes is, "You can tell the ideals of a nation by its advertisements," and I think that's true. You know, the ideal woman, the ideal man, the ideal romantic interlude, whatever, you can tell an awful lot about a society simply by watching its television commercials, looking at print ads, things like that. You can tell what the country is about just by seeing that. Our advertising is very telltale about what is important to Americans, and some of that is, you know, just a personal opinion. Some of that is disturbing to me, but anyway, that's sort of the nature of our society. How many of you believe, this is sort of off the subject a little bit, but how many of you believe that that there should be some censorship, that some things should not be shown or said or something? How many of you believe that that is infringing on your freedom of speech? How many of you are not going to commit? Okay. That's a pretty good argument brewing right now and all too, you know, with the lyrics of songs and that sort of thing. But, something that's just happened recently is there are now laws to protect musicians' rights also. You know, a lot of commercials will use songs that we're all familiar with. It may be something, you know, from a classical song or something like that where the artist is dead. But you know, you also see like songs from the 60s and 70s and all used. Well, now they're saying that musicians have to give permission for that song to be used in advertising, so the musicians' rights are being protected now. In the past, you know, you could just pick up anybody's song and never had to ask their permission to use it, and you could use that song for whatever purpose you wanted to. Well, the artists, you know, that was always troublesome to them because their work sometimes was used to hawk products that they didn't believe in or that they didn't want to be associated with or something like that. So now their rights are being protected so that they have to ask permission to use that song.
What about if the artist is dead?
A lot of times the estate still has control. For instance, Elvis, you know, his image is everywhere, you know. The estate still has the power to reject or accept a question like that. You know, they don't. John Wayne's the same way. Their images, you know, a lot of times you'll see. Was it Coca-Cola here recently that did the black and white ad, and Humphrey Bogart and Cary Grant Cary Grant danced with Paul Abdul and things like that, you know, and their images were used in those advertisements. Their estates, those people are dead, but their estates had to give approval to use their image in that advertisement. There was just a big uproar recently when they were honoring Ginger Rogers at the Kennedy Center about a year ago, and Fred Astaire's widow did not agree and withheld the film of Ginger Rogers dancing with Fred Astaire. She wanted them to pay to use that footage of her husband. And they weren't going to do it. They said, you know, this is to honor Ginger Rogers. We don't think it's right that we should have to pay to show the film of her dancing with her most famous partner, that sort of thing. And so the widow said, well, then you can't use that film. I'll sue you if you do. So they didn't. They showed Ginger Rogers dancing with other people and by herself and all this stuff, but Fred Astaire's image was not allowed to be used for that ceremony and all, because she had the right to say, I don't want it used. You'll see John Wayne and people like that used on greeting cards. Their state has to give the approval to use their image or their likeness.
Is there a limitation, sort of like statute of limitations, like for the classics, or, you know, Michelangelo, or?
Those images, for instance, if you want to use a painting that a museum owns or a private person owns, you have to get permission from a museum or something to use it. There's a lot of images that are they're considered free reign, you know, and a lot of it is things like that. They're considered public domain.
How about the Mona Lisa? I mean, they mock her all the time.
Mm-hmm. That images from that long ago are considered public domain to my knowledge. They're not protected. There was an instance where a designer in New York City was going to use a Mondrian painting as a reference for a record label design for a company, and the Museum of Modern Art owned the rights to that painting, and so she had to get written permission to use it. Yeah, I mean, it was a design that was printed on labels and things like that for this record company, but it was the same color scheme, and it was just straight off that painting, that Mondrian painting. So she had to get permission to use that, and they didn't charge her anything. It was just given, you know. A lot of times that, you know, if you think about it, that's considered free advertising, you know, to allow an image to be used can bring back profits to you.
Photograph, I think if somebody takes a photograph, they can copyright it. It's a lifetime plus 50 years. I don't know if it's the same design.
I think there is some difference in everything. Partly because, you know, with photography, since you have a negative, you know, you own those negatives and you sell prints from those negatives. And with artwork, there's like one original and that's it. And so there are some differences in the laws, but they're, you know, they're real nitpicky and that sort of thing. I'm certainly not a copyright lawyer, but there are some differences, and you're right, but I didn't realize that it was lifetime plus 50 years. Still, that doesn't seem, you know, with real famous photographers, you would think that their estate would still want to retain control over how those images are used and sold and all. I know if it's artwork, you know, you've seen before, like the old-fashioned line art drawings from the turn of the century that were used in newspaper things, you know, the old-fashioned drawings. Like, remember at Wendy's, they used to have those kind of old-fashioned newspapers on the table? Anything that was created before 1911, as far as artwork, anything that's created before 1911 is probably copyright free. 1911 is when those laws came into effect to protect artwork. So if you do your research and you know that it was created before 1911, you can probably use it without having to pay any sort of royalties or anything. But after that, it's not. Other things that have been a question are about useful everyday objects. If you design a chair, for instance, and someone else mimics that product and designs something just like it and tries to sell it, useful everyday objects are not copyrightable. So cars are not protected by copyright. You know, that's why you see a car company come out with this new aerodynamic design And then, you know, all the other car companies, they end up looking alike because they do stuff, they design them just like that. You know, they became popular. And that's because cars' designs are not protected by copyright. Lamps and tables and stuff like that. Ideas are not copyrightable. You can have the idea to go sketch, you know, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You can go do that and sketch it. Your sketch that you created is copyrightable. That's yours, you own it. No one else can reproduce that sketch. Someone else can come and sketch the exact same item, and you don't have any right to say they can't, because they can, anyone can do that. Your sketch is the only thing that's protected by copyright. The style in which you drew something, or the style of photography that you use, that is not protected by copyright. You know, you'll see people imitate and mimic other people's artistic styles, and you know, there for a while, you know, you might have seen a particular kind of photograph used real diffused or something, some particular lighting style or something like that. Those things aren't copyrightable. Anyone can mimic your style and create some form of art. But the item that you create, that song, that photograph, that drawing, that logo, those items that you did create, as soon as you lift your pencil off the page, that item is yours and protected by copyright.
How much does it cost to copyright something?
It depends on the item, and I'm not really sure about each individual thing, but it depends on the item. You can do, there's one little trick that you can do, and that is you can create the design and send a copy of it. You know, stick it in an envelope and address it to yourself, stamp it, send it through the postal service, and when it comes back to you, you have to leave it sealed. But because it's metered and it has the date on the stamp, you have dated it, and it's a sealed envelope, and so that is sort of that's the cheapest way possibly you can protect yourself from infringement. If you go into a court of law, you can present that as evidence of when you created that artwork or photograph or whatever. Otherwise, you have to register it, and it's, you know, a little legal cost or something like that to do that. What would be nice is just to have people respect other people's creations, you know, and not have to worry about it. But it's too easy now to steal.
What about, I guess this still would be advertising, but like the tabloids, so many times they create a message that maybe wasn't there, but a combination of pictures, and even a while back, it's been quite a while back, there was a picture on Television Guide of Oprah Winfrey superimposed her head on
Anne Margaret's body.
Anne Margaret's body. What's the penalty for that, or how can they get away with that, or?
They can't get away with it if they're called on the carpet about it, and in that case they were. Anne Margaret or someone, you know, someone.
That.
It was actually, I think, an illustration of Anne Margaret, and anyway, they were called on the carpet about that, and they had to. It wasn't. There might not have been any money that even changed hands. I think they had to like reprint and state what they've done or something. You know, it's handled differently in every case. You can settle out of court, or you can go to court and try to get damages and all. A lot of times they just simply say, if you'll stop running it, we won't sue you. Just pull it, don't run it, and that usually works in a lot of cases. I know the design studio that I worked at, we designed an advertisement that was going to use the grill of a Rolls Royce to compare this product with the quality of Rolls Royce. Well, and we were going to buy this as a stock photo. It was you can purchase the rights to use this photograph of this grill of the Rolls Royce. Rolls Royce has restrictions though on how their photography can be used. It can be used editorially. It cannot be used for retail or in advertisements. The client made the decision that since this ad was going to run in a small trade journal, that no one would ever see it, and they made the decision that they wanted to use that photograph. And that we had to have them sign a contract that said that if they got sued, that we would not be liable because they had made the decision. and it ran. It was a real low circulation trade journal, maybe 3,000 or something like that, and it ran, no problems. Rolls-Royce never saw it. No one was ever sued, you know. But they made that ethical decision because once we designed the ad and we had, you know, found out the restrictions, we had to tell them about those restrictions, and they said, we'll take our chances, you know, and they did, and everything turned out okay. But you know, that was the client's decision. I certainly would not have, we probably would not have decided to do that. It's too risky, you know, to threaten your business. But anyway, a lot of things are settled out of court, and they'll just tell them to pull the ad. See, you can superimpose people's heads on bodies and all that sort of thing very easily with Photoshop or any other photo manipulation software, and that's where tabloids are being sued more now for the images they show and the words they use. To say someone's having an affair or something like that, you know, they'll get sued an awful lot now. I think they're being a little more careful now. They're just saying that, you know, everyone's, you know, been impregnated by aliens.
Yeah.
You know, someone who can't sue them. They're just getting around it. We'll just say they have pigs instead of babies. Do you have any other questions or anything? Or, have you ever seen an advertisement or something that you kind of wondered, you thought, you know, how can they get away with that? Or a product, have you ever purchased a product and the packaging, you looked at them on the shelf and the packaging looked real similar or something, and it was obvious they were trying to copy it? Or
Generic products, stores and stuff seem to simulate real close to the
and that's a real gray area too, because they're trying to push it as far as they can push it to try to make the consumer think that their product is just as good as the name brand product without getting themselves into legal trouble. And you know, so far I think you know, most cases are able to get away with it. They're not. Generally, the question is, if you have created a design or something like that that looks so close to the original that the average person can't tell the difference, then you're in that gray area that you don't want to do that. You know, you want to change it so that it's not similar. A lot of people think that if you scan someone else's photograph and you change it a third or something like that, some set amount, that you're free of any legal problems, and that's not true. You can't just take someone's design and think that if you alter it quite a bit that you're okay, because you've still stolen from them in a sense. There was also a case where a photographer had taken a picture of a man and a woman sitting on a park bench, and they just had puppies in their arms, and there were just puppies all across their lap, and they were just holding 10 puppies or something. A sculptor did a three-dimensional sculpture, life-size sculpture of that photograph. And it looked just like the woman, looked just like the man, the same puppies, the whole 9 yards. Have you seen it or remember something about that? Or?
No.
The photographer instructor that talked to us, like Mark Moore. Go ahead, though, because I forgot what he said.
Well, the photographer took him to court and was his rights were defended. The sculptor, I'm not sure what he had to do. He had to pay damages or what it was, because he'd sold the sculpture and had made money off of it, had profited from his theft. So I think he had to return the amount of money he paid and pay some damages and court costs and things like that. But they found in favor of the photographer, and in my opinion, rightly so. You know, anyone who takes an image like that, and whether you create it in another form, you know, that doesn't matter. You're still stealing from their art, their artwork. And so, in that case, they were found in favor of the photographer.
Would it be easier to do that with music? I had a student give a speech one time, and he had his equipment there, and he was pulling from all sorts of different directions, and he created an entirely different piece of music from several other people's music.
On the student level, no one usually has any problem with that because you're not profiting from it.
He was showing how it could be, how it was done.
How it could be done. If he took that same technology and created some song that was sold for profit, and the artist who recognized parts of their music or something in a song, they could sue him, and who knows, they might win, they might not. But the real question is if you profit from it. You know, students, like in our department, students use color Xeroxes of photographs when they're designing a brochure or something like that. Well, they're not about to take that brochure and go sell it to a client and make money from it. So they're just doing it to create a comp to show their design skills, to put in their portfolio. So there's no money made, and everyone agrees that on the student level that's okay. You know, it's if they do an illustration of a famous person and try to go sell it to that famous person or something, the person who took that photograph has every right to sue the illustrator for using their image. You know, because it's just a recreation of their photograph also. It just depends on if you're trying to make money from it. Which is, I suppose, the bottom line.
I have a question for you. What is the reasoning behind, like, game shows or other different shows when contestants are on there, or they're not allowed to state the name of a company where they work, or like on some television shows, they cover up the labels of food products. I mean, you can see what it is, but what is the reason behind that?
It used to be that in an ad, you could not compare your product to another name brand product. You couldn't name them in the ad. And then in the mid-'80s, they had a ruling that they created a new law that said that you could. And Burger King was one of the first ones I remember that they immediately, all of their advertising started comparing them to McDonald's. And they said, you know, these rude things about McDonald's, you know, and talking about this ugly guy in an orange wig and all kinds of stuff. And now that's legal to do, but on a game show or something like that, or when they're showing in a news report or something like that, they may cover up the names and stuff just because they fear retribution, they fear a lawsuit that they slander. You know, they're just trying to avoid a slander suit, in my opinion. On game shows, you know, I don't know why they couldn't say that they worked for American Airlines or something like that, other than it would be free advertising to have their name mentioned on national television.
They always state like a major corporation, or,
Yeah.
but they're not allowed to state the name of that corporation.
Probably, and I could be wrong, but it probably could be that the companies that give products or donate products or whatever that are given away don't want to have someone else's company name mentioned probably in the same show. A lot of times they'll come on and they'll say, you know, airfare provided by Delta Airlines or something like that. And they probably don't want someone else's airline mentioned during that show. They want to be the only airline mentioned. So it's probably something that the shows are getting from the sponsors of the show, I'm guessing. They just don't want to have the show.
Does anyone else have any questions?
So now you're going to go out and you're going to look at that photograph and you're going to say, wow, that's a creation that someone did, and I respect them for that. And I'm not going to steal that, right? Right. All those logos that people toil hours and hours and hours trying to refine.